People always ask me, when did you first realize your husband was hiding something? Most expect me to say, the late-night phone calls, the strange receipts, or the weekends he suddenly started working. But they're wrong. The truth began with 7 quiet words from my 8-year-old son. Mom, I found a locked door upstairs. At first, I laughed because our attic didn't have a room. At least, that's what my husband had told me for 11 years. My name is Claire. I had been married to Ethan for just over a decade. He was calm, organized, the kind of man who planned vacations 6 months in advance and labeled every storage box in the garage. He wasn't mysterious. He wasn't careless. If anything, he was painfully predictable, which is why what happened that Saturday afternoon still doesn't make sense. I was folding laundry in the living room when Noah ran downstairs. His face was dusty. His knees were covered in insulation. Mom, I found a room! I smiled. In the attic? He nodded excitedly. There was a little hallway behind all the old boxes. And at the end, there was a door. I stopped folding. A door? Yeah, it's locked. I frowned. Are you sure it wasn't just a closet? No. It has a real doorknob and a keyhole. Something about the way he answered made me uncomfortable, because Ethan had always said our attic was unfinished, just wooden beams, old Christmas decorations, nothing else. That evening, when Ethan came home, I mentioned it casually. Noah says he found a locked door in the attic. For just a second, less than a heartbeat, his smile disappeared. Then it came back. Oh, that! He laughed softly. It's nothing. What do you mean? It doesn't go anywhere. It was sealed years ago. So why is it locked? He shrugged. The previous owner left it. I've never even opened it. His answer sounded normal, but something about it felt rehearsed. Later that night, I asked again, if it's empty, why not just unlock it? Ethan looked up from his laptop. Because there's no reason to. It's probably full of mold or damaged wiring. I don't want Noah getting hurt. That explanation should have satisfied me. Instead, it made one question louder. If he'd never opened it, how did he know what was inside? The next afternoon, while Ethan was helping a neighbor fix a fence, Noah tugged on my sleeve. Mom, can I show you? I hesitated, then followed him upstairs. The attic was exactly as Ethan had always described. Dust, old furniture, storage bins, broken lamps, nothing unusual, until Noah pushed aside 2 large cardboard boxes. Behind them, hidden from the main attic, was a narrow wooden passage, barely wide enough for one person. At the very end stood a faded white door with a brass doorknob and a small antique lock. I walked toward it slowly, my heart beating faster with every step. Then I noticed something strange. The floor in front of the door was spotless. No dust, no cobwebs, no footprints except fresh ones. Someone had been standing there recently. I reached for the doorknob. It didn't move. Locked, just as Noah had said. Then, I heard a car door slam outside. Ethan was home. The front door opened. Ethan? I called. We're upstairs. His footsteps echoed through the hallway. For a moment, I considered pretending we had never been there. But it was too late. He stepped into the attic and froze. His eyes went straight past me, past Noah, and landed on the hidden hallway. For the second time in 2 days, that calm expression disappeared. Only this time, it lasted longer. What are you doing up here? His voice was sharper than usual. Noah smiled proudly. I showed Mom the secret room. Ethan forced a smile. Buddy, I told you not to play back here. It's dangerous. Noah looked confused. But you come here. The attic went completely silent. Ethan slowly turned toward him. What did you say? I've heard you. Sometimes at night. You walk up here, and then I hear a door close. My heart skipped. I looked at Ethan. He laughed. A little too loudly. You were dreaming. No, I wasn't. I heard you last Tuesday. And again, when Mom went to visit Grandma. Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked at me. Kids imagine things. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But Noah wasn't a child who invented stories. If anything, he was painfully honest. That evening, Ethan barely spoke during dinner. He kept checking his phone, every few minutes. Whenever I looked at him, he smiled, but it never reached his eyes. After Noah went to bed, I walked into the kitchen. Ethan, if there's nothing behind that door, why does it bother you so much? He sighed. Claire, I'm tired. Can we please stop talking about this? It's just an old storage room, so open it. I don't have the key. You said the previous owner locked it. Exactly. Then let's call a locksmith. His face hardened. No. The answer came too quickly, too firmly, almost like he'd been expecting the question. Around midnight, I woke up. The other side of the bed was empty. I checked the bathroom. Nothing. The kitchen. Nothing. Then, I heard it. A soft creak. Above me. The attic. I quietly slipped out of bed. The hallway was dark. Only the moonlight coming through the windows lit my way. I climbed the stairs, one careful step at a time. Halfway up, I heard another sound. Metal. Like a key turning inside a lock. I froze. Then, silence. I reached the attic entrance. It was slightly open, just enough for a thin strip of light to escape. I held my breath and looked through the gap. Ethan stood at the end of the hidden hallway. His back was facing me. The white door was open, only a few inches. He quickly stepped inside. Then, the light disappeared. The door closed. A second later, I heard the lock click. I waited. 1 minute. 2. 5. Nothing. He never came back out. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe 30. Eventually, I walked back downstairs, pretending I'd seen nothing. When Ethan finally came to bed, it was almost 2 in the morning. I kept my eyes closed. He thought I was asleep. He gently slid something under his pillow. Not into the nightstand. Not in his pocket. Under his pillow. The next morning, he left early for work. Earlier than usual. The moment his truck disappeared, I walked into our bedroom, lifted the pillow, and found a small brass key. Old. Scratched. Its tag had only one handwritten word. A-titch. I stared at it, my hands trembling. For 11 years, he told me there was nothing behind that door. But if there was nothing, why keep the key hidden beneath his pillow? I slipped it into my pocket, without realizing that someone else had just seen me. From the bedroom window across the street, our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, was watching my house. And when our eyes met, she slowly shook her head, as if she already knew exactly what that key unlocked. Mrs. Holloway didn't wave. She didn't smile. She simply looked at me, then slowly closed her curtains. I stood frozen in the driveway. That look wasn't curiosity. It was fear. The brass key felt strangely heavy inside my pocket. I wanted to walk back upstairs immediately, unlock the door, end the mystery once and for all. But something stopped me. If Ethan had hidden that key beneath his pillow, he expected it to stay there. If he noticed it was gone, he'd know someone had been searching. So I slipped the key back exactly where I'd found it. Every scratch facing the same direction. Every corner, exactly as it had been. Years of balancing company accounts had taught me one thing. Details matter. That afternoon, I walked across the street carrying a plate of homemade cookies. Mrs. Holloway had lived there longer than anyone. She'd seen 3 different families own our house before us. If anyone knew something, it was her. She opened the door only halfway. "Oh, it's you." I baked too many cookies. I smiled. I thought I'd share. She accepted the plate politely, but she didn't invite me inside. Instead, she looked over my shoulder toward my house, then asked quietly, "Has he shown you the attic yet?" I felt my stomach tighten. "No, he says it's empty." For several seconds, she said nothing. Finally, she whispered, "That's what the last owner said too." I blinked. "The last owner?" Mrs. Holloway nodded slowly. "There was a family before yours. Husband, wife, a little girl. They only stayed 4 years. What happened?" She hesitated. "I don't gossip." Then she looked directly into my eyes. "But if I were you, I'd stop believing that every locked door is there to keep people out. Sometimes," she said, "they're there to keep questions in." Before I could ask another question, she quietly closed the door, leaving me standing on the porch with more questions than answers. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 1:30, I heard Ethan get out of bed again. This time, I was ready. I waited 30 seconds, then followed him. Barefoot, slowly, carefully. The stairs creaked beneath his weight. Then, silence. I reached the attic entrance. The hidden hallway was dark. No light. No sound. I crept closer. The white door was closed. Locked. Ethan was nowhere in sight. Confused. I looked around. Then I noticed something I'd somehow missed before. Fresh paint. One section of the attic wall looked newer than the rest. Different shade. Different texture. I pressed against it. Solid. I knocked gently. Thud. Then a few inches away, I knocked again. Hollow. I frowned. There was empty space behind the wall. A hidden cavity. Maybe another room. Maybe a passage. I leaned closer, running my fingers along the trim, until I felt a tiny metal latch, almost invisible beneath the paint. Before I could touch it, a voice behind me said quietly, "Claire, what exactly are you looking for?" I spun around. Ethan stood at the attic entrance, his face expressionless. No anger, no surprise, just watching me. I forced a smile. I couldn't sleep. "So you came up here?" He took one slow step forward, then another. "I've been asking myself something," he said calmly. "Do you trust me?" The question caught me off guard. He smiled. "Because trust is the only reason a marriage survives." He walked past me, placed one hand on the locked doorknob, and without opening it, said something that made my blood run cold. "You know, some rooms are locked because the truth inside destroys families." Then he looked directly into my eyes. "So let's not open this one," he turned. Walked downstairs, leaving me alone, staring at the white door. For the first time, I wasn't just curious. I was afraid. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Ethan's words echoed through my mind. Some rooms are locked because the truth inside destroys families. Most people would have dismissed it as dramatic nonsense. But Ethan wasn't dramatic. He chose every word carefully, which meant he wanted me to hear it. The next morning, everything felt strangely normal. Ethan made pancakes. Noah laughed while pouring too much maple syrup. The morning sunlight filled the kitchen. It looked like the kind of family breakfast people post on social media. Perfect. Happy. Safe. But I couldn't stop looking at Ethan. How could someone smile so naturally while hiding something only a few feet above our heads? As Ethan grabbed his keys for work, he paused beside me. "I'll be home late tonight." I nodded. "Big meeting?" He smiled. "Something like that." Then he kissed my forehead. For years, that kiss had made me feel loved. Now, it felt like an apology. The moment his truck disappeared down the street, I drove back to Mrs. Holloway's house. This time, she invited me inside without saying a word. Her living room smelled like old books and lavender. Every wall held framed photographs stretching back decades. She handed me a cup of tea, then quietly asked, "Did you find the key?" I nearly dropped the cup. "You knew about the key?" She nodded. "I knew he'd eventually hide it somewhere close." "How?" She stared out the window. "Because the last owner did exactly the same thing." I leaned forward. "Who was the last owner?" Mrs. Holloway sighed. "A man named Richard Collins. He lived there with his wife, Evelyn, and their daughter, Hannah. They seemed happy. Until one day, they disappeared." I frowned. "Disappeared?" "The neighbors were told they'd moved to Oregon." But she hesitated. I never believed it. Why not? Because Evelyn came to my house the night before. I felt my heartbeat quicken. "What did she say?" Mrs. Holloway's hands trembled slightly. She asked me one question. "What was it?" She looked directly into my eyes. "If something happens to me, will you remember that I tried to tell someone?" Silence filled the room. I whispered, "What happened the next day?" Mrs. Holloway looked away. "They were gone, driving home." I couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn. Maybe she'd really moved. Maybe everything had been innocent. Or maybe history was repeating itself. That afternoon, Noah was building a Lego castle in the living room. Without looking up, he asked, "Mom?" "Yeah, buddy? Why does Dad talk to someone upstairs?" Every muscle in my body tightened. "What do you mean?" "He says he's working, but I hear him talking." "When?" "At night. What does he say?" Noah shrugged. "I can't hear everything, but he always says, 'I'm almost finished.'" "Finished with what?" The question echoed in my mind all afternoon. At 5:30 p.m., I made a decision. Not because I was brave, because I couldn't live another day wondering. I waited until Noah left for soccer practice with my sister. The house was completely empty. I climbed into the attic. The hidden hallway seemed darker than ever. The white door stood exactly where I'd left it, waiting. I reached into my pocket. The brass key slid smoothly into the lock. For one terrifying second, I almost turned back. If I opened that door, there would be no pretending anymore. Slowly, I twisted the key. Click. The lock released. My hand rested on the doorknob. I pushed it open, just enough to see inside. The room wasn't dark. It wasn't abandoned. It wasn't full of old furniture. Instead, it looked lived in. There was a neatly made bed, a bookshelf, fresh flowers in a vase, a lamp, still warm. Someone had been there, very recently. Then I noticed something sitting on the small wooden desk, a framed photograph. I picked it up. It showed Ethan, standing beside a smiling woman, and between them was a little girl, about Noah's age. My breath caught. It wasn't an old photograph. It had been printed less than a month ago. And written across the bottom, in Ethan's handwriting, were 4 words that shattered everything I thought I knew. Our family, forever. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I looked at the photograph again. The woman looked to be in her late 30s. Dark brown hair, kind eyes. She wasn't posing. Neither was Ethan. It looked natural, like a real family photograph. The little girl couldn't have been older than 7. She was sitting on Ethan's shoulders, laughing. I turned the frame over. The back carried a small photo studio sticker, printed 18 days ago. 18 days. Yesterday. Ethan had told me he'd spent that afternoon meeting investors in Charlotte. He hadn't. He'd been here. With them. I slowly searched the room. Nothing looked abandoned. A small wardrobe held neatly folded clothes. Most belonged to a woman. A lavender sweater. A denim jacket. A pair of running shoes. On the bedside table, a novel lay open. A bookmark rested halfway through the pages. Someone hadn't finished reading it. They expected to come back. Then, I noticed a leather journal. No lock. No name. Just worn brown leather. I opened the first page. The handwriting wasn't Ethan's. It belonged to the woman. The first sentence read, "If you're reading this, then Ethan failed to keep his promise." I froze. Promise? I kept reading. "My name is Emily Harper. If Claire ever finds this room, please don't let her hate him before she knows everything." I stopped breathing. She knew my name. The next pages weren't love letters. They weren't romantic. They were medical notes, hospital appointments, medication schedules, physical therapy sessions, MRI results. Every page documented the same diagnosis: early onset Alzheimer's disease. Emily wasn't Ethan's wife. She was his younger sister. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. None of this made sense. Ethan had told me his parents were only children. He'd said he had no siblings. Why would he lie about having a sister? I turned another page. This one was dated 6 months earlier. Today I forgot my own birthday. Ethan cried after I left the doctor's office. He thinks hiding me protects everyone. I told him secrets destroy families. He said this one might save ours. Tears filled my eyes. Not because I understood, because I didn't. Another envelope rested beneath the journal. Across the front, written in Ethan's handwriting, were the words, "For Claire." My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Claire, if you're reading this, then you finally opened the attic. I'm sorry. Not because you found the room. Because I couldn't find the courage to tell you the truth. Emily is my half-sister. My father abandoned her before I was born. We didn't meet until 3 years ago. By then, she was already sick. She begged me not to tell anyone. She didn't want pity. She didn't want Noah remembering her the way this disease will leave her. She only wanted one place, where she could still feel like family. So I built this room. I know I should have trusted you, but I was terrified you'd think I'd lied about everything. Maybe I did. If that's true, I'm sorry. More than you'll ever know." I lowered the letter. My entire body felt numb. For 4 days, I'd convinced myself I was uncovering betrayal. Instead, I'd uncovered grief. A grief Ethan had carried, alone, for 3 years. Just then, I heard the front door open downstairs. "Ethan?" His voice echoed through the house. "Claire?" Footsteps. Slow. Steady. Climbing toward the attic. I wiped my eyes, still holding the letter. The attic stairs creaked. Then, he appeared in the doorway. He looked at me. Then at the open room. Then at the letter in my hands. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he whispered, "I was hoping you'd never have to read that." Ethan didn't move. He simply stood in the doorway. His eyes weren't angry. They were tired. The kind of tiredness that comes from carrying the same secret for far too long. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I held up the letter. "You should have trusted me." His shoulders dropped. "I know. You lied to me for 3 years. I did. You let me believe that there was nothing behind this door." He looked around the room. I wasn't protecting myself. I was protecting her. For the first time, he told me everything. 3 years earlier, a lawyer had contacted him. His father, the man who had abandoned Ethan when he was 12, had died. While settling the estate, they discovered something no one in Ethan's family had ever known. His father had another daughter, Emily. She had grown up only 2 states away, never knowing she had a brother. When they finally met, she had already begun forgetting names, forgetting birthdays, forgetting faces. The doctors diagnosed her with early-onset Alzheimer's only weeks later. She had no husband, no children, no parents left alive, just Ethan, the brother she'd found, only to start losing him through her own fading memories. "I wanted you to meet her," Ethan whispered, "more than anything. So why didn't I?" His voice cracked. "Because every time I tried, she forgot who I was. Some days she called me Richard. Some days she thought I was our father. And on the worst days, she didn't remember meeting me at all." He wiped his eyes. "I couldn't ask Noah to watch that. And I couldn't ask you to watch me lose the only sibling I'd ever have." Tears rolled down my face. Not because of the secret, because he'd carried it alone. And because he'd made the worst possible choice for the right reason. Just then, a soft voice came from behind us. "Daddy?" We both turned. Noah stood at the end of the hallway, still wearing his soccer uniform. He looked from me, to Ethan, to the room. "Who's Emily?" The silence that followed felt endless. Ethan knelt in front of him. "She's my sister." Noah frowned. "I didn't know you had one." "I know. Can I meet her?" Ethan looked at me, then back at Noah. "I think it's time." The following Saturday, the 3 of us drove to a small care home just outside Asheville. Emily was sitting in the garden, watching birds gather near a fountain. She looked up as we approached. For one beautiful moment, she smiled. "Ethan," he smiled back. "Hi, Em." Then she looked at me. "Are you Claire?" My heart stopped. "Yes." She reached for my hand. "I've wanted to meet you for such a long time." Before I could answer, she looked at Noah. "And this must be your little boy." Noah smiled. "I'm Noah." Emily laughed softly. "I always wanted a nephew." We spent the afternoon together. She told stories from childhood. Some were real. Some belonged to memories she'd borrowed from dreams. Nobody corrected her. Nobody argued. We simply listened. Because sometimes, love isn't about holding on to every fact. Sometimes, it's about making someone feel safe, even when their memories no longer can. Emily passed away peacefully, 9 months later. At her memorial service, the director of the care home handed Ethan a small envelope. "It was for your family." Inside was a folded piece of paper, written in Emily's fading handwriting. "Thank you for giving me a home, even when I couldn't remember where home was." A year later, the attic looked very different. The hidden room was no longer locked. The white door stayed open every day. Emily's books lined the shelves. Her favorite chair sat beside the window. The flowers were always fresh. Sometimes, Noah would sit there reading. Sometimes, I'd drink coffee in silence. And sometimes, Ethan and I would simply hold hands. Not because every wound had healed, but because we'd finally stopped hiding them. People often ask me whether I ever forgave my husband. The answer is yes. Not because lying is acceptable. It isn't. Secrets have a way of growing until they become walls between the people who love each other. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It gives the future a chance to exist. The locked door in our attic was never hiding another family. It was hiding one broken piece of ours. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is unlock the door before silence becomes permanent.